Good morning, English 11. Happy Wednesday. Almost done. Today and tomorrow are the last days of school for you guys, and then we are on summer break. And I am as excited as you are, I think. So today we're going to continue our theme. We're talking about contemporary American poetry. This is an American literature course at its heart, and I think we would be remiss not to mention some of the great writers that are writing right now. I think I have a fun one for you today. His name is Terrance Hayes. Terrance Hayes is an award-winning poet. I always try to pick, obviously there are amazing poets writing right now who have not won awards, who are younger and who are doing amazing things, but I also want to show you and expose you to the best of the best. When we're reading poetry, it's often dense, it's often difficult, so you might as well read something that has been proven or is just widely considered to be great, right? And that is what I'm trying to present to you today. Terrance Hayes has written a number of different books, many of which have won some pretty serious, pretty prestigious awards. He won in 2014, he won 2 awards, which I would call to be pretty awesome. He won the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant, in which you probably haven't heard of. But the Genius Grant is basically they call you up on the phone and they say, congratulations, you won a MacArthur's Genius Grant, and they sign over $500,000 to you to just keep doing what you're doing. They're like, you're awesome, you're a fantastic artist, and you are contributing something meaningful to society, so you know what, here's $500,000, just keep doing what you're doing, you know. And so that's an honor, of course, and even if you've never heard of it, you know what $500,000 could do, so that's pretty fun. But almost even more interesting is his award. He won. He was featured in People magazine as, and they called him the sexiest writer. So at 43 years old in 2014, the same year he won the MacArthur Genius Grant, the People magazine named him sexiest writer. Which, if that's not an awesome title, I don't know what is. Like that's a pretty great year, you know? You win 2 awards in 1 year. Fantastic. His poetry, though, is why we're talking about him today. And he's written some really interesting poetry about all sorts of things. It's not all, of course, it's not all, you know, Black Lives Matter, or it's not all about race, or it's not all about what it's like to be black in America, though those are the ones that we're going to be reading today. He writes about all sorts of things. So yes, but he came out with a series of poems just shortly after kind of some of this stuff started in the modern time period. I don't know. I guess it's always been, race relations has been a simmering pot in America for a long time, and it's something that you know, isn't going away quickly, and has certainly been a conversation in this country for a really long time. But you know, there's always sort of new iterations and new art being made. So this series of poems was published in 2017. Which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong now. Hey, Wilbur, stop Wilbur, no, hold on. Wilbur, no. Bless you. He's chewing on stuff as usual. I need more sleep. Okay, so anyway, so he's talking about race in America. 2017, I think, was around the same time as some of the Ferguson stuff that was kind of simmering still, and you know, there was some protests, peaceful protests, as well as riots during that time period. But it's still recent. Like, that's 3 years ago, right? So it's still really recent poetry, and it still really applies, I think, in terms of sentiment to a lot of the feelings that are happening and just the events that are happening certainly right now as well in 2020 in Minneapolis and in cities around the world. So all of these poems, and I have 3 of them for you today, but they're short, are because they are sonnets. So Shakespeare was famous for sonnets. He wrote many sonnets. And he was also famous for writing in iambic pentameter, but Terrance Hayes kind of diverges from that part of the format a little bit. So he sticks to the 14 lines, and there is a couplet at the end of sorts, I guess, but it doesn't follow the iambic pentameter rhythm. So I'm going to read one of these to you, And then I want to let his voice take over because he's got a pretty sonorous voice, and also I think it's just better coming from him. I'm a white dude. I can't begin to express for this poet, these poets, what their life is like, right, and what their experiences are like. So I think it's better if I let them speak. But I also can't resist because the poetry is so beautiful. So I'm going to read one poem first, and then I will let Terrance Hayes read you the next, and then I'll come back at the end of each one, and I'll kind of talk to you about what I think it means, or give you a sense of what it means, and some of the feelings that are being expressed. And then the questions will be the same. What emotions are you feeling when you're reading these, and what do you get out of them in terms of, do they remind you of something else that's happened in your lifetime? So here we go. Just a word of warning, some of these poems do have some instances of really strong language, and there are some really harsh images in them. But I think, again, I'll reiterate, these poems have literary merit. I mean, they have won awards. They are just really well written. I don't think it takes much to realize that there's a lot of really interesting things going on here. So the literary merit is why I'm bringing them to your attention, not because of the strong language, but you can't read the poem without reading the strong language. And again, if you find that sort of thing offensive, just stop the video right here, and I will find you different poems with equal literary merit to analyze and along a similar theme. This one is called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin, which all of the sonnets are called that, right? But this one is there's the subtitle as well, which says, Probably Twilight Makes Blackness Dangerous. This one is called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassins. And then there's a subtitle with each one as well. And the subtitle for this one reads, Even the Most Kind-Hearted White Woman. Even the most kind-hearted white woman, dragging herself through traffic with her nails on the wheel and her head in a chamber of black, modern American music, may begin almost carelessly to breathe N-words. Yes, even the most bespectacled hallucinations cruising the lanes of America may find her tongue curls inward, entangling her windpipe, her vents, toes, and pedals when she drives alone. Even the most made-up layers of persona in 2- or 4-door vehicles sealed in a fountain of bass and black boys chanting N-words may begin to chant inwardly, softly, before she can catch herself. Of course, after that, what is inward is absorbed. So I think this poem is kind of talking about, this idea of these well-intentioned white women. And if you know anything about demographics, right, typically when you think of white women in suburban America, she's in suburban America, and oftentimes women are, just demographically speaking, oftentimes more liberal than conservative, and especially in the suburbs. And the opposite is true of men. Men tend to go towards sort of the more conservative side of the political spectrum. And so oftentimes white women will categorize themselves, I guess, as like allies and that sort of thing. However, there is sort of this pervasiveness of black culture that sort of has seeped into the mainstream American culture as well. And so what's interesting about that, of course, is that even the most kind-hearted white woman, which is how he characterizes this hypothetical woman, will sometimes, while you're just sitting in traffic, be listening to some popular music, right? A lot of our greatest hits these days come from artists of color, right? And she might be tempted into speaking language that is not necessarily appropriate for her to speak. And that's kind of what he's kind of digging at there, and it's up to you, I think, as the reader, to kind of realize whether or not he's condoning that or not. I would say he's not. I would say softly before she can catch herself. Of course, after that, what is inward is absorbed. There's a little ambiguity there. There's also a little bit of just gentle criticism, which is kind of interesting there as well, just in terms of a lack of awareness, right, of the culture, the prevailing culture, and of African American culture as well. Got another one for you, and I'll let Terrance Hayes take this one away. American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. Probably twilight makes blackness more dangerous.
American sonnet for my past and future assassin. Probably twilight makes blackness dangerous darkness. Probably all my encounters are existential jambalaya, which is to say, a nigga can survive. Something happened in Sanford, something happened in Ferguson and Brooklyn and Charleston, something happened in Chicago and Cleveland and Baltimore, and happens almost everywhere in this country every day. Probably someone is prey in all of our encounters. You won't admit it. The names alive are like the names in graves. Probably twilight makes blackness, darkness, and a gate. Probably the dark blue skin of a black man matches the dark blue skin of his son the way one twilight matches another.
All right, so this one's really interesting. Of course, we noticed over the course of this past week and the weekend that things take a slightly different turn. Peaceful protests during the day oftentimes lead to a little bit more chaos maybe at night. Of course, that is a mere reflection of the sort of fear that that people of color in this country feel after nightfall, right? And you have to notice that a lot of these instances of police brutality happen at night, and I think that's what he's trying to express here. Again, same questions. What emotions were you feeling while he was reading this poem to you? And then does this remind you of anything of your own experience? And if not, that's okay too, of course. But just tell me what you think of that. Okay, I've got one more poem for you. I know this video is getting kind of long, but your assignment is simple. It's just your reaction. So here's American Sonnet from My Past and Future Assassin. I lock you in an American sonnet that is part prison.
American sonnet for my past and future assassin. I lock you in an American sonnet that is part prison, part panic closet, a little room in a house set aflame. I lock you in a form that is part music box, part meat grinder, to separate the song of the bird from the bone. I lock your persona in a dream-inducing sleeper hold while your better selves watch from the bleachers. I make you both Jim and Crow here. As the Crow, you undergo a beautiful catharsis trapped one night in the shadows of the gym. As the gym, the feel of crow shit dropping to your floors is not unlike the stars falling from the pep rally posters on your walls. I make you a box of darkness with a bird in its heart. Voltas of acoustics, instinct, and metaphor. It is not enough to love you. It is not enough to want you destroyed.
Okay, this poem is complicated. There is a lot going on here. Metaphors piled on top of metaphors with references to Jim Crow, and there's wordplay going on there as well. In the poem, of course, he says Jim, G-Y-M, right? And then Jim Crow is J-I-M. The law in the South, right? That was present in the South, and so there's a bunch of different metaphors piled on top here. And I think the simplest way I can put it is that he's really playing with language. He likes to play with language. He also likes to express, sort of just this idea of what it's like to be black in America, what it's like to be an African American on American streets. The last one you saw at night, you see a little bit of darkness in here as well. But also there's this idea that maybe a lot of people would like to shoehorn other people's identities into a box, into something that they can control, something that they would like to see as this sort of ideal and hold it up to be the ideal of what a human being should be. And he's pushing back against that, right? Lines like, I lock you in a form that is part music box, part meat grinder to separate the song of the bird from the bone. That's this idea that America, while it doesn't want to be defined itself, we we as Americans want to define it, and we would like all Americans to kind of fit within this mold that we're going to call like perfect, right? Like this is what the ideal American should look like, and oftentimes that ideal vision is very exclusionary, right? It's very kind of very one-sided and unrealistic. So again, obviously you don't have to understand everything that's going on here. There's a lot going on here linguistically, but in terms of literature, but you can get the general sense, you can get the feeling, I think, from it, and that's what I'm asking you to respond to. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, of course.